shouldn't be like, oh, your body's some like big scary thing. No, it's a part of you, and you get to know all the good parts of yourself. If you're able to build that confidence with yourself and what you like, then it's going to be much easier to communicate that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sex Positivity Unfiltered, where we talk about sex and we are not polite about it. My name is Lyndsey Murray.
And I'm Denise Stratton.
And today we have a very special guest with us. We're going to be covering the topic of how to build confidence in your sexuality. And here with us today is Cheyenne Robinson, a marketing professional and ADHD queer sexual health educator with a mission to help AFAB, or assigned female at birth folks, embrace their confidence and love themselves shamelessly. As the founder of the Bitch and Babes Girl Gang, a supportive online Facebook community, love the name, by the way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cheyenne creates empowering content that combines education, humor, and a touch of witchy inspiration. Outside of her work, Cheyenne lives in Arlington, Texas with her adopted dog, Lizzie McGuire. She's passionate about normalizing conversations around sexual health and making her audience feel seen, valued, and empowered. So Cheyenne, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't you just tell us, we'll just start off kind of general question. Tell us more about what you do in the sexual health, sexual education space, and what sexual confidence means to you.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been specifically in the space working with AFAB women for about 3 years, but I have been in the sexual health space for 7 years. I actually started out working with gay and bisexual men and volunteering and helping them with a nonprofit for events. Basically, we throw fun parties and make sure people got tested, whether they're there to know their status, and basically they're taking care of their own health in a sex positive environment. So that's really what got me into this, and just seeing that, hey, like being in a space where it's like open and like encouraged to talk about your sexuality and it's not seen as like shameful, really opened my eyes to the possibilities. And I wanted to create that type of space for people like me. And the past 3 years, I've really been working on mostly content creation, where I share about my own journey and building my own confidence in my sexuality, and shame, because shame keeps us from really getting to where we want to go and being our true selves. And so that's where I really focus. And what I do is just share my story, and I share tips and education around sex, confidence, and selling shame to fuck off.
Hey, no, for real,
yeah,
for real.
Good.
Yeah.
You're right. Sex does keep us hidden, I think, right? Like you don't really get to embrace who you really are if there's a lot of shame.
Yeah.
What is your personal story, if you don't mind sharing with our audience? Like, what's been your journey to, like, you finding your own confidence in this realm?
Yeah. So I actually grew up in a small town in Texas, very small population, 3,000, very Christian based, very conservative based, and pretty much was taught abstinence only sex education. And even that, there wasn't really any conversation about sex. It was just what was happening with your body, and that you're going to have a menstrual cycle, and
reproductive education.
Yeah,
That's
that was pretty much all we got. And so I didn't really have any sexual confidence. I didn't really even know much about my own body.
Yeah.
I think when we're kind of grow up and being taught that our bodies are a bad thing, or they're only worthy when there's a penis attached to it, it's a very confusing message, especially for someone like myself that I consider myself bisexual. And like being told that that was the only thing that was okay created a lot of shame for me, and thinking that something was wrong, or that I was a bad person, that like I had to have a men to have pleasure. And so if I want to have sex, masturbation isn't okay, so I need to have a person with a penis. And so that was kind of the mindset. And by doing that, then I didn't actually learn about what my own desires were, which created a lack of confidence in the bedroom, right? And so it's been a long journey. I'll say that. And the past 3 years, I've just become really passionate about sharing with others that they don't have to have the shame, and it's okay to have sex as much or as little or not at all. Whatever is the frequency in which you want is normal. So to me, sex confidence is really just knowing what you want and not being afraid to ask for it or give it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sounding like a lot of like what sparked your passion to teach others about sexual confidence is the fact that you grew up in a very sex negative household, which I gotta say is very common here in Texas. Like where I'm sure you're preaching to the choir whenever you're like literally in front of a bunch of Texans around, and yeah, we've all had that same experience. What was like that aha moment where you were like, this is kind of what I want to do, like for like this is my purpose in the world, is to teach others?
I think really when I was volunteering for the nonprofit for gay and bisexual men, and we're having these parties.
How'd you discover them in the first place?
So when I first moved here, I had a bestie who was Insta famous in the gay community, and I would go to like a lot of parties and things with him, and his name is Nick Straciner. He'll probably want me to give it a shout out to him.
Okay, hey Nick.
So we would go to a lot of parties and events together, and one of them we went to was an Impulse. And so first I would go as like a guest and I would like pay, and then I started to realize, I could just volunteer and go to these events. And so I did that. Then I became the marketing director. And then in my last run, I finally like kind of shared more about my story with them and my experience in sex work. And everyone was just like so supportive and didn't look at me like any different. They actually said that they like understood more of why like I was a part of the group and like wanted to be involved. And so that was really an eye-opener for me, and seeing that like the more I share my story, the less shame is attached to it.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then also that people need to know like that they're not alone, and whatever shame that they're holding on to, that it's something that they can let go of. And so being around that environment made me want to create a similar environment for like, other people like me, because there's not really spaces where people assign female at birth where we can go out and just like talk about our sexuality or openly. It's really something that's looked down upon, and oftentimes we're told that we shouldn't be sexual, or even like historically when you look, they did for the longest time, they didn't think that we actually felt pleasure. We were only meant for birthing, right? And so
the myth of the orgasm,
right? Or that. Like women just don't orgasm. Like, that's not a thing,
right?
It's
right.
Like, well,
I
don't know about that.
Yeah, they say 1 in 8 people with vulvas haven't had an orgasm, and there are some studies that say, some people aren't able to. I really question that though. And is it that they're not able to, or is it that they're only having penetrative based intimacy? Because more than I've seen different studies, I've seen 70%, I've seen 80%, I've seen upwards of 85% of people with vulvas need clitoral stimulation to orgasm. And so if you're only having penetrative intimacy and you're like, I think something's wrong with me. No, you're probably part of that 85%. There's just so much that goes into all of that, and thinking that something is wrong with me, and then you kind of build up that shame, and
that anxiety gets in the way of having one too.
Yeah.
You know, like I've seen clients where they've never had one, and then you kind of have to suss out like why, right? Like what's going on there. And sometimes it's anxiety based. It's like they're trying so hard to make it happen, but like one way. And it's like the harder you try to make it happen, like the more pressure you put on it, the less likely it's going to happen. So it becomes this like vicious cycle, right? So sometimes you have to really get back in tune with your body and find like what might actually work. And usually it is clitoral stimulation, or it's like something else. It could be, it doesn't even have to be like genital based at all.
No, I love the thought of, getting in tune with your body, because I feel like a lot of the reason why maybe it doesn't work is the fact that we have the sexual script, right? So like you see it in the media, you know, guy gets on top of you, guy gives a couple of pumps. I'm sorry for the crudeness, right? But at least from my perspective, when I look at those media things, it's mostly the guy getting gratification, and the girls.
Where's the foreplay?
Yeah, it's just like instant, which in reality, the script that we see versus the actual script that's, that makes sense, that gets you there, is very different.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, and also going back to like confidence, like being confident in your sexuality, for someone who isn't confident at all, that's almost like another source of anxiety, because if you're having sex with someone and you're naked with them, it's very vulnerable. And if there's no confidence there, I know people can also be very closed off to even giving it a chance, right? To like relax enough to enjoy pleasure that could come from it, right? It's all kind of intertwined, I think.
And I think that trying to like really focus on that this has to happen, and if you have the focus being on an orgasm, it really kind of distracts and takes away from being able to like be in the moment. I often say in my Facebook group and the content that I create to focus on pleasure, not how can I perform better or how can I have more orgasms, but how can I have more pleasure. And by having that focus, you can be a little bit more confident in yourself, because it's focused on pleasure and not an outcome.
Yeah, like absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this to both of you, especially for our audience. What would you say, what are common barriers? Like why do we see this influx of people who are just not confident in the bedroom? What would you see as the most common reason why?
Like body insecurity is a big one, for sure. I would say that's probably one of the biggest ones. But performance anxiety too, because I'm even thinking about like men, right? And I'm very much gender stereotyping here. I know this isn't like true for everyone, but I feel like with women, I see more body insecurity. With men, I see performance anxiety.
Okay.
They're worried that they're not going to please their partner. They really psych themselves out, and it leads to them not being confident. It's like a vicious cycle, right? It's like, I want to perform really well. I want to please them. I want to give them an orgasm. Yeah. Which isn't really how, like, I think you have to own your own orgasm, but they want to like give that. And then if that doesn't happen, they can internalize it. And it's like, what am I doing wrong? Okay, I've got to do better. And then they do focus on some like expectation or outcome as opposed to just being in the moment. Okay. Those are the two. There's more, but those are like two big ones that I see.
I would also say rejection sensitivity.
Oh yeah, girl. Okay.
That would be one. So like being worried if they ask for something, they're going to be denied it or told no, and then they're going to be like, oh, like feel bad about themselves. And so then, and if you're told no, or to even, I'm probably sure you see this as a therapist, if you have a lot of sensitivity to it from like your childhood, you might like have concerns of, oh, if I ask for this, I'm going to be denied like this need. And that can definitely be a big challenge. And one reason why even if I should work with a therapist to try to work through that. But some of those things can definitely tie into confidence. We've also talked a lot about shame. So if you grew up like I did, where you're kind of taught like, we're not sexual, or you're not supposed to be a sexual being, or this is something that you're only supposed to do when you're married. And if you do it outside of marriage, something really bad's going to happen. Yeah. So you have that fear. So there's so much that can really hinder your confidence. And so I think it's different from every person. And so it's worth identifying what's keeping you from getting where I want to go. Is it shame? Is it that I'm not confident in my body? And the body image has been a struggle for me as well. Okay. I'm in the largest body that I've ever been in my life. And so there's a lot I've had to like work with and accepting my body. And I still struggle with, they say to like love every part of yourself, but that's still a struggle for me. And so what I so I have to work on gratitude. So how can I give my body gratitude or like speak to it with kindness? Because I might not be able to in a place where I can say like, oh, I love my belly, or I love these parts of myself, or I love my cellulite. But I can provide like give myself gratitude and like love, and try to like work towards being in love with all the parts of me. And that, you know, really goes into like confidence. You're being like naked with someone and like vulnerable, and like, are they going to like say something about my body image, or like worrying about it and things like that.
When you say like you're giving yourself gratitude, what do you mean? Like what, like explain more.
So for me, like for my arm, I have this association of like my weight and like this like kind of like a false sense of like protection.
Okay.
And so a lot of it ties into like trauma, and I think that a lot of people can relate to that in some way. But so for me, like when I like rub like lotion on my arms, I like, okay, thank you for protecting me, or thank you for keeping me safe. I had a car accident a couple of years ago, and I had a seatbelt injury and a hematoma, and like now I have tons of scar tissue like in my stomach that won't go away without like surgery. And so for that, I'm like, hey, thank you for protecting my like organs. So things like that, just finding a way. So like some people, I haven't birthed children, but for those that do and have stretch marks, and I know that sometimes that can be an insecurity. So like you can give gratitude for like being like my battle scars of that journey. So yeah.
So in a way, pretty much like having at least a positive reaction to your body versus being forced to love it, which is very hard, at least for me. Very hard to do.
I think like body positivity is hard for a lot of people. Yeah. And so I know with clients, sometimes I'm just helping them reach at least a neutral stage, right? Okay. Like if they're really like picking apart their whole body, if you can even just get to neutrality, that is a much better place to be than if being like if like loving every part of your body seems fake or impossible. Like, you know, it's hard if something feels inauthentic, right? Like you can tell yourself like find parts of your body that you love, but if that feels inauthentic, the gratitude piece, the neutrality of, hey, this is my body and I don't have to hate it, is sometimes like enough.
No, I like that. I like pretty much rebranding, like again, a positive interaction. I really enjoy that. So for, I'm assuming as someone who kind of came up into this journey, who is now much more confident than she was, what did not having any confidence look like for you when it came to your sexuality? Were you just like putting on like this mask, like as far as?
Yeah. So I would say like outwardly, it probably looked like when I was younger that I was like super confident. Like externally, it looked like I was super confident, but like internally, I really wasn't. And I think if I talked to my like younger self, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, I'm super confident, but like I know better now. But for me, when I was younger, it was like hypersexual. I would just be having like all these different partners, but I wasn't actually having like super pleasurable intimacy. It was just more of, I was like outward seeking like validation and things that confidence boost and like dopamine boost, but like in a negative way. And so by doing that, it actually added more shame on top of all the shame that I already had. And so that just, for me, it just made me less confident. And then two, when I had partners, like didn't feel confident when like I need to like reach over and like ask for like the lubricant, or if I was like uncomfortable or like in pain, I didn't feel that it was okay for me to speak up and say like something was wrong, or
you just got to get through it. Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Or if I was kind of like over it, instead of saying like, hey, like let's stop, just like continuing through and like being like, okay, I'm gonna wait until they're at a spot where they want to stop. And so I really wouldn't prioritize my own needs.
That has been my experience as well when I was younger, like the hypersexuality, like the whole point of it. Of course, when you're going through it, you don't really put it together, but like when I reflect back, it was all just one big like validation, like, oh, I'm attractive enough for people to like want to have sex with me, so that feels really good. But the actual sex was not intimate or vulnerable. And then when you get older and you get in a healthy like I'm married now, you get in a healthy relationship and sex can actually be vulnerable. That is almost like too uncomfortable, because you're like, whoa, this is space where I can speak up and I can like slow things way down. I can ask for what I want. But if you've never had to do those things before, that's a big task, right? To figure all that out, because you're like, oh shit, now I have a lot to figure out about myself. Yeah. Whereas previously, you know, you could go partner to partner and sex is typically the same every time, but you're like, at least I'm hot enough for people to like want to sleep with me. I mean, like literally, like that's how I felt because I did not actually feel that way.
Yeah.
It's more of an act versus, you know, an actual like meaningful connection.
Yeah, because I wasn't actually confident. It was just like, if enough people want to be with me, then like that must mean something, but it wasn't actually internal, right? Okay. So it's interesting.
So how'd you guys like go from like using sex as kind of validation and like, all right, I look good now, so this is what we should be doing, to now it's about me. It's less about their gratification, so that way I feel good about myself. Now it's about my gratification.
Yeah, so lots of therapy.
Okay. No, fair. Hey, proud to hear it.
Yeah. And two, I think just like as you get older and you grow and you learn and take those kind of situations and kind of like think through like, okay, things are different now. I like where I'm at, and just kind of, processing that. So I think for me, therapy and like reading like educational like podcasts and stuff.
Okay.
That's all really helped me. And then just talking about it. So like anything that you're really scared to like share, the more that you like give that acknowledgement and like talk through it, the easier it becomes. So then you don't have to like keep letting it hold you back. You can get to wherever it is that you want to go next.
So what I'm hearing is educate yourself is like the
empower
biggest
yourself,
step.
Yeah.
And learn about yourself. Okay. Yeah. I think for me, I just eventually wanted a real relationship. Okay. You know, after years of kind of like the same old bullshit, like it was like, why am I doing this? Like I have to get validation for myself some other way. And then that's when you really start learning about yourself. And then you really open yourself up to like a genuine relationship, if that's what you want, right? Which that's what I wanted at the time. Yeah. So it just kind of took me realizing that about myself.
Wait, so I mean, a lot of trial and error is what it sounds like, which is what the 20s are, which sucks. And I'm sorry, guys, that you're in your 20s right now, or people who are just now getting into relationships and finding this out. Yeah, for me too. It took a lot of me dating the wrong person and also being the piece of shit I was as far as a partner. It took a lot of those heartaches. It was after my last big heartbreak where it physically affected me, right? Like I couldn't see pictures of them. Like I would just crumble into a piece of tears. It took that for me to like that light switch to go on and be like, okay, I need to change my act. And B, I also need to have certain boundaries and certain things put in place that are what I want. I'm no longer settling, right? But it's hard. In order for you to get to that point where I'm no longer settling, it takes a lot of heartache. And
it's also a lot of hard internal work. Like, like going back to like the confidence piece, like confidence to me is like really knowing yourself. Okay. But that also means like knowing the ugly parts of yourself too. Where you have to admit like, I've done things that maybe I didn't really want to do, or like there's parts of there's things that maybe I want to change or learn about or whatever. If you go through that really hard work, that can actually lead to a lot of confidence, because then you can accept like I'm flawed. Yeah. And that's fine. Yeah. And I can improve or maybe there's parts I just need to accept about myself. But I think that's what makes it so difficult. It's like when I see someone who's like genuinely confident, like sexuality space or not, I feel like they've done that hard work, right? They know themselves pretty well.
Yeah. It is work, because it's, some people will think, oh, you're just born confident or you're not, but that's not actually the truth. You have to work at it. And I wouldn't say that like I'm 100% confident in like all aspects of my life, but it's something that I continuously work on, and I'm more confident now than I was when I was in my 20s.
It's kind of like a healing journey. It never really ends. Like you don't reach like, okay, I've crossed the finish line of confidence. I'm good now, right? Yeah. Like it is always kind of a thing you've got to look at.
And two, there's like different phases of your life. Like I was saying, I'm in the largest body I've ever been in. So like now I'm in a different phase of that like sexual confidence in my body. And it's different from when I was in 20. And that's going to change too. And the cycles of like, as my hormones change and as my body changes more. So it's always going to be something that you have to like work on accepting yourself and where you are.
That is so true. We just did a recording about like pregnancy and like I'm about to have a baby. I'm definitely in a different phase of confidence than I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, it just changes because things change. Yeah.
So, okay. So, because we're talking about how to build sexual confidence, I do feel like a lot of your success as someone who is confident in your sexuality or sexually is your ability to communicate, right? Like, so I would say that is kind of a big deal. Like, that's a big skill to have, is being able to, like you said, be able to communicate what your pleasures are or what you want out of this experience. Or so how. What advice would you give to someone who has no idea how to communicate what they want in the bedroom?
Yeah, so I would say you need to start by exploring yourself. Hopefully, everyone listening, that's something that they're already doing. But if not, definitely start there. So find out what you like. Are you like the clitoris is like lefty and right answer? Are you ambidextrous? Am I saying that right?
Ambidextrous.
Yeah, there we go. Or are you lefty or a righty? Like figuring that out. What feels good for you? Do you like sucking? Do you like air? Like you can play with like different vibrators and see, do you even enjoy penetration? So exploring to find out what you like, and then you have to have a partner that you trust and you feel safe with. So if you're not able to communicate your needs or you don't feel safe, that's not going to be good sex. And so that's super important that you have that trust. And if you're able to build that confidence with yourself and what you like, then it's going to be much easier to communicate that. I also, I believe that if you're more confident in your like everyday life, that you'll have more confidence in the bedroom. So like if you're in a work meeting and you're scared to speak up, like starting small and like saying something in that meeting the next time, or work on doing like affirmations that feel good or like neutral for you, and just continuing to do something every day, that trying new things that boost your confidence is going to help you feel better in the bedroom and better at speaking up and communicating what your needs are. There's also what's from Harvard, there's like the 6.
Oh yeah, the sexual health principles.
Yeah.
I'll pull it up right now so I can read them to you.
So I worked with a sex therapist for a while, and that was something that was shared with me. And when I first learned that, it was like mind blowing to me. And so for like back to like being comfortable and like having communication in the bedroom, it's important that you're having like healthy sex. And what is healthy sex? Well, I think these concepts are like a really good place to start, because if you have all of these aspects, then it's going to be easier for you to communicate and have really great sex.
Yeah, it's on the Harvey Institute website. But the 6 principles of sexual health are consent, non-exploitation, honesty, shared values, prevention of STIs and bloodborne infections, also like unwanted pregnancy, like protection from that. And then the 6th one is pleasure. So I like how they list all this out, because I think a lot of people don't always think about these things when it comes to like a genuinely healthy sex life, even consent, like how often have we heard, I mean, some people in a marriage think they have full access to your body whenever they want just because you're married.
Yeah, I'm entitled to it.
Yeah. But like a genuinely, like to have a safe place where you can be confident is a space where you can always consent or not consent, and that's going to be respected, right? So like just going down that list totally could help with like confidence.
These are concepts that you're supposed to have an understanding with your partner on, I assume?
About with yourself.
Okay.
And with your partner as well. Like one of them says, shared values.
Yeah.
That's really important. Like what I always think of regarding shared values is like when I wasn't like in a committed relationship, I had sexual partners. For me, we would need to use a condom every time. I met someone who was like, well, I don't wear condoms, I'm out.
Like no problem.
That's a shared value we should have. If I'm going to enter this space with you, you don't value that, I'm out.
Okay. Gotcha.
But some people don't, it's like putting it in that context of shared values, I think helps make sense of it.
Yeah. But and like also with like unplanned pregnancy, like if something happens, making sure that you're on the same page of what the result is going to be.
You probably should have that conversation before you have a sexual partner, but sometimes that's difficult to do. I would say, especially with like one night stand, I'm thinking like club nights is what I'm thinking. But
Yeah.
wow, okay.
Yeah, we're not always having those conversations, right? Like I haven't always had that conversation. I've had one night stands where I'm like, I never would have thought to mention that. You know what I mean?
That's true though.
But if you're really trying to like find your voice, you know, that might change what kind of sex you're having.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if we didn't, in those 6 concepts, if we didn't have one of those, would that be considered unhealthy sex, or it's more of a
I don't know if there's any of those. Oh, you're saying like, because if you're having a one night stand and you don't have that conversation about unplanned.
Yeah, would that be considered unhealthy sex, or is it more like a spectrum, like where this is kind of what a goal we're trying to aim for, but it's not necessary?
I don't know if unhealthy is the right word.
Okay.
I just think you might be missing out on something.
Okay.
If that makes any sense, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because you could still have pleasurable intimacy and not have like a plan for like if something happens later. But if something did happen later, you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah.
Because you'll already have talked about it and know like what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's a spectrum, I would say.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really enjoyed the whole like step 1 as far as like building sexual confidence being like getting in tune with yourself, right? First, having like a little date with yourself and figuring out what you like. That can be difficult for people to do. Or actually, that's a good question to ask you, Lyndsey. Is that something that's difficult for people to do?
Yeah, it's difficult because a lot of people don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Like you can explain that, but it's like, well, where do I even begin? I actually have a really good resource for this. And honestly, I use this mostly with like AFAB clients, like assigned female at birth clients. But it's this book called Becoming Orgasmic. And I think it was written like in the 70s. So when you look at it, you're like, this looks outdated. But I think this book was like ahead of its time. Every chapter has different exercises of how to explore yourself. And it kind of starts with like a body scan and just like looking at your genitals. And then it will move into like different ways to touch yourself. And then it will move into, it kind of like builds upon itself. Like it gives you very direct instructions of what does exploring your body look like, which a lot of my clients really like because they can literally read it.
A roadmap, yes.
A roadmap. Try it at home. It'll tell you how long to try. Like set aside 30 minutes, 2 times a week or whatever. And so like the first half of the book is much more like solo play, solo exploration. And then if you have a partner, like the second half of the book kind of incorporates like partnered activities that you can try. I love that book because when you're talking about building confidence, you have to know what it is that you like or what you want to ask for. And if you don't know that, it's almost like, how do you know what you don't know?
Okay.
You don't.
Yeah. Okay.
And this gives you, very much gives you a roadmap. And so in like the episode description, we can put a link to that book.
Oh, definitely.
I think it's like $15 on Amazon or something like that. But like, if you don't know where to start, finding a resource to help you get started is a really good place. Like, because I'm like that. I'm like, if you can give me instructions, I can do instructions.
Yes, please.
And then if you are working with a therapist, I process it with them in the session. Like, how did it go? What did you try at home? What emotions came up for you, if any? Sometimes people might feel pretty neutral about it, but sometimes a lot of emotion can come up, and it might even be, that was really uncomfortable. I don't know how much I enjoyed that. And I just let that be okay. Like there is the great thing about this resource is there's no expected outcome. It's not like, hey, try this because you're supposed to love it. It's more like you're gathering data that's just going to give you data. Okay. Hey, I did not love this exercise. Cool. You didn't need to love it. What specifically happened for you in it? Right. And we walk through, and it gets really complex because kind of like you were saying, if someone is like lacking confidence in other areas, and this is very much me wearing my therapist hat, but you're also working with their mental health. So if they're like naturally an anxious person, I think they're going to have a harder time doing these exercises.
Like overthinking, did I do this right or wrong? Or,
yeah. And they'll ask like, hey, did I do this right? And I'm like, there's no right.
Okay.
Like if you just tried it, that's all I would ask you to do, right? Or if you're working with, like going back to the question of what can cause someone to not be confident, if someone has like a sexual trauma history, even exploring your own body can be really hard. because it feels wrong.
Okay.
Like sex is tied to this really dirty, ugly thing. And even like staring at yourself naked in the mirror can be like the most uncomfortable thing you ever do.
I can imagine it might bring back some of that trauma. Yeah, for sure.
So you're having to watch out for that too. So that's why I like, especially when it's a client who's like coming in, I always make space to process that with them, because who knows what's going to come up for them, right?
I have I struggle with like OCD, like more of the like the thoughts part of it, like I think we call it like pure O. And so sometimes like I really would struggle with like trying to be like intimate with myself, and then having like something completely off the wall like come up in my mind that would like be like super like inappropriate, and I'd be like, oh, something's wrong with me. But basically it was more of like the shame and then like my brain. And so like things like that, like you have to talk to your therapist and like actually share these things, because keeping it like internalized just makes it harder for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I agree with you. And you always want to work with a therapist who's going to give you that space. Like if you tried something, that's a place to find your voice. Like even coming in and going like, that really scared me, and these are the thoughts that came up, and I hated it, and I didn't know what to do, or whatever it is. Like, we want to know.
Yeah. And two, like, I think for me, like, I've worked with a lot of different therapists, and I've had where I've thought, okay, I think like I feel like this therapist is gonna like judge me if I like share this with them. And sometimes I would share things, and if I felt like I was being judged, I don't think they actually were judging me. But in those instances, you can actually like just like share that. I feel like you're judging me, and see what they say, because that'll oftentimes like realize, oh, like they're not actually judging me, and this is a safe place. But if you're not able to get there, sometimes it can help to work with like a sex therapist in tandem with like your regular therapist, and so that you feel more comfortable like diving into these other aspects of your life that maybe you're not there yet with your regular therapist, or you feel more comfortable knowing that this is someone that specializes and talks to other people about their sex lives every day.
Yeah, actually, that was something that was very mind-blowing to me whenever I met Lyndsey. It was the fact that a lot of people who reach out to her as a sex therapist don't even need help with sex at all. Like, that's not what they just come to her because they know it's someone who definitely won't judge, because she sees an array of lifestyles, right? So I always find that cool. So now I get to pick your brain, because you've come from the other side. I've only had one therapist. I've never had, I haven't had that many. I've never had a sex therapist. So what were things that they did that actually put you at ease when it came to being able to talk about like your experiences?
Yeah, well, I would say like even before I actually met with them, I did my research, and the sex therapist I work with actually worked with sex workers in like Australia. So it was on their website, on their About Me. And so that immediately put me at ease, because I was like, okay, they've worked with people that have done what I've done or been where I've been. And so that made me feel more comfortable that like I could share and like not feel judged.
It was mainly that experience that you know that they had these experiences with other clients that aligned more towards, I guess, maybe your value system.
Yeah, that's what like helped me the most there. And I think now I have I don't necessarily work with a sex therapist, but I work with a queer woman, and so like for me, like that makes me feel more comfortable. I've had a therapist before that like I talked about. I was like starting to date women. They're like, oh, do you want to explore that? Do you want to, like, almost like it was like something was like wrong with me doing that, and like it was like a problem that needed to be explored. And so working with someone that is in like the community makes me already feel more comcomfortable like going into their office.
Oh, hell yeah.
So
with anything for me, like anytime I can go into a space and I know that they're LGBT friendly, there's automatically like a lift off my shoulders of
I think how the therapist markets themselves matters a ton. Like I feel like when I think about my website, I think like what you put on your website is going to make a difference into how comfortable your clients feel. Like I know for me, if I haven't seen my therapist in a while, but I've had the same one for a while, but like for me personally, if the therapist is like Christian based or faith based, I'm not going to go to them. But some people really want that.
Yes.
So I think you're right. Like just seeing their experience or kind of their theoretical framing or even like self-disclosure, like knowing the therapist is queer. Like I have ADHD and I'll get a lot of ADHD clients simply because I'm willing to share that. I'm like, oh, same. Yeah. Like I professionally work with that. Personally, I know that experience as well. And I think that makes a big difference in how comfortable clients will feel with you.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. I don't actually know if my therapist is neurodivergent, but I think if I did know that, it would probably make me feel like even more comfortable, which I think I'm gonna ask her that in our next session.
Yeah, relatable. It makes you more so much more relatable.
Yeah. So like it's definitely one of those things. And too, like when you are neurodivergent, your brain works differently, and so having that diagnosis also like helped me be more confident in myself and knowing that, oh, I'm this way because my brain works differently.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So now I kind of want to take a shift back a little bit to like your journey and how you got here, to kind of help with this question. So my question is basically how does society and norms and everything, how does that affect someone's sexual confidence? Like, how did that affect your sexual confidence?
So I would say that like being in like a place that's more like conservative and like having experience with like sex work, that like I had a lot of shame, like, oh, like I'm a horrible person, or like I have this big secret that I can't ever tell anyone. Oh, and then too, like having medical so when I was in college, I was adamant about like getting tested, which you always get tested regularly. And when I was having like hypersexual experiences, I was getting tested regularly. And they had on the form, you had to put like how many partners you had. And so whenever I went to the medical provider, I don't remember what time it was, but they basically was in there and they were like shaming me for how like the increase in like what the increase in partners were.
Bullshit. Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So
fuck them.
They should have been like saying, yeah, I see you have had like a increase in partner. I mean, didn't even matter, but like, hey, good for you for like coming in and like getting tested. But like,
right.
I don't even like that question.
Me neither.
Like, I think the question should just be like, how many sexual partners have you had? Like, I think it should just be removed.
If you sexually active?
That's
done.
it. Yeah.
Done.
And I'm getting tested and that's it. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I don't think, hopefully they don't still like ask this. This is at the University of Texas at Austin. Hopefully they don't still do it. If they do, like someone like stop that. But yeah, they shamed me and basically were like, you should be like worried about like what your future husband is going to think about this.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Not the future husband.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want a husband, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if I even want a husband.
Yeah. And so like how I grew up and then having that reaction of like, I'm now like damaged goods was basically like what message was like sent to me. Yeah. I just was like crying in there. And if they would have like maybe like approached it differently and been like, hey, like is something going on? Like, are you safe? Like, I'm concerned. That would have been like taken like a lot different. And they have like free like counseling. So like it would have been better if they just said, hey, you know, I'm kind of worried. Like, are you safe? You should maybe consider going to the counseling. Not like, what's your future husband going to think about it? Who cares about my future husband? Am I okay and safe now?
Right.
Yeah, I'm here to have a medical procedure done. There should be no counseling of sorts coming from this person giving a test. I don't know.
But that's like the outdated heteronormative narrative, right? Is like, we have to think about the guy in this situation. But but for so many people, it's like, what if there's no guy in this situation? Right. Like even that question, like, how many sexual partners have you had? All of your sexual partners could have been women, like for all they know, right? Like it's just, I don't know. It's so outdated that I'm hoping we're getting better about that.
Even the whole the shaming of the body count drives me honestly insane, because to me, even when you were hypersexual during that time, I understand, like reflecting on it, there were some things that I was working out through during that time, but at the same time I was also exploring. I was exactly what advice we're giving. I was figuring out what works for me, what I like in a sexual partner. There was a level of exploration that I really did enjoy when I was dating and having all these sexual experiences. Like I really did enjoy that. And I hate that we're shaming that exploration. Like anything else, whenever you're trying to find more information about it, or you're just trying to master whatever it is maybe the pleasure in your body, it requires practice, right? Like if you're trying to get better in traveling, if you're trying to get better in math, there's a little bit of like, you have to explore, you have to practice,
you might need a tutor.
Yeah. Exactly. Like there's any other activity, that's the advice we give, except for when it comes to being a sexual being, which we all are. No, that you need to just magically come out of the womb as your sexual being. You only give it to one person, and that's that there should be no trying to get good at it. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that like comes from like problems in society and being like, we need to have control over everyone, and being like, hey, these are the rules that are set out. No, like you can make your own rules, and you don't have to just be with one person, and doesn't have to be the opposite sex. Like, these, just throw all of that out the window, because that's where a lot of our shame comes from when you grow up with that. But it's just so wild how many like medical professionals can shame you and just kind of like tear you down. So it's like important that you're not only working on your confidence like in yourself in the bedroom, but then also like with your medical providers too.
This is why I like the sexual health principles, because they're principles and not rules, right? Like, meaning have as many sexual partners as you want, but I would advise using protection, getting consent, making sure you're actually enjoying the experience, making sure you're not being exploited. Like those principles I think need to always be there. And when you have that as like the foundation, you really can do whatever you want from there. You can sleep with whoever you want, however many people. You could be in a poly relationship. You could do whatever you want, but you kind of have this like, it's almost like a safety foundation, right?
Yeah.
Because if I ever, because kind of like you were saying, like even just asking the question, like, are you safe or are you being safe? Valid question. Like, let's not judge having multiple partners, but I think that's a fine question to be like, hey, use a protection because I want you to be healthy.
Yeah.
Accurate.
While you do it. Yeah.
So whenever you guys like started gaining sexual confidence and you found yourself like getting more confident, and did you ever have peers or people around you that would like kind of look down on you for it, like at all? Like, was that
for not like having as many partners, or I guess there's not really having many or less. It doesn't really tie into confidence.
Just for having sexual just for that confidence. Yeah.
Okay.
Or being able to talk about it, or have you ever come across those people that are like, no, we don't, like that's not something you need to
I
confident
have,
about,
especially like on social media, because I'm sharing there, people be like, ew, or things like that. But for me, I'm just like, okay, you're not my people if that's your reaction. And two, like you might be in a place of where you're not ready for that step in your journey, and maybe you don't ever want to be, and that's your business. For me, it's just like I don't surround myself with people who are gonna like bring me down and tell me like what I'm doing is wrong, because I know that it's right.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. I didn't really have anyone in my personal life that looked down on me for that, luckily. I mean, maybe I guess that kind of speaks to like, I think I've done a pretty good job of like my support system is very supportive, right? Like I've never felt judgment from those that are really close to me.
Oh, good.
Now, if I were to say something on social media, you'll probably get some shit, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I think you don't have to pay attention to that, Like you said, you don't, like, you're not my people if there's judgment and shame there.
Yeah. Okay. And I definitely have had like partners where I'm like, hey, like we should use lubricant, and they're like, you're young. Like I've had someone like react that way. And then I ended up like having to like educate them on like, it doesn't matter like your age, there's like 300 plus medications that cause vaginal dryness, and like like your hormones affect like, there's just so many things. And so like I had to educate them on like, nothing's wrong with me, like grab the lubricant.
Or what if I just want to use lube?
Yeah.
Like
sometimes you're just not like fully aroused yet, and you're like, we could just use lube and that would help me.
Right.
And it would feel good. Yeah. And like,
As some people like slip and slide. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, what if that's Like, what if you're just like, no, I just like using it. Like, yeah.
Unfortunately, partners find that tied to their performance level, right? If you,
yes.
If you need lube, that means I haven't gotten you turned on enough. And now in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with my performances?
Yeah,
Ronda,
and that's something like they need to work through.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey had that whole quote. You know what I'm talking about? Ronda Rousey. I think she's like UFC.
Oh yeah,
I
know who Ronda Rousey.
She had a whole thing where she was like, if you have to use lube, you're doing it wrong. And I was like, that's pretty fucked up. But of course, like, people agree with that. And I'm like, so that's the belief is like, oh, if we use lube, that means something is wrong here. And really, there's no meaning to it. It's just, I want to use lube, right? Like,
no, it's your ability to, want also, pleasure. And
and also, like, is like a protectant of your body, like protecting yourself from micro tears. The vaginal walls
the friction. And
I always use the example, if you've ever peed after, like, intimacy and it, like, burned a little, probably need to use lubricant.
Yeah. Yep, because there's tears.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I mean, same concept with the whole, whenever a man doesn't like his wife using toys, right? And I feel it's kind of tied to that same, our raw dog natural selves should be enough to pleasure you on the times that I'm here, and you shouldn't need toys, you shouldn't need lube, you shouldn't need anything extra. It should just be me.
That's a hard one for some people to overcome. I've
really?
Seen
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a little, I mean, I like working with people through that, but I've also seen people that don't want to work through that. They're like, nope, hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
No toy.
There's no willing to budge.
But that can bring such nice things to your sex life.
That's their choice, but but internally I'm like, ooh, you're missing out.
I have a hard time with it too, because I work with all types of people, and I've had people that are like, oh, like, let me get my treasure trove of toys, and then others that are like, oh no, that's like a hard no for me because my partner's enough. And I try to, like, it's their business. I try to be okay with it, but I have a really hard time with that because I'm like, are they really enough? I'm like, I'm like, because like, I'm like, it could be so much better. But I also am not in there with the bedroom with them, so I don't know. They could be having a grand time, but
yeah, who knows?
I have a hard time with that because I'm like, if you've tried a toy and different toys, they're like shoes. You gotta have like different menu options.
Or sometimes you just want to play with yourself, even if you have a partner. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to play with yourself. You just want to. Yeah. You're by yourself in your room.
Yeah, I was about to say, how you works the best.
Yeah, sex doesn't always have to be partnered, even if you have a partner, know. So
okay, sorry for that tangent. Okay, so back to how to build self confidence. So if someone does feel disconnected from their sexual self, how would you say they can start rebuilding that with a partner? Like, we went through definitely getting to know yourself, but a lot of people have partners with them. So
I would say, like, really, like, it comes back to communication, also having conversations. So sometimes it can be really hard to communicate in the moment. Sometimes you want to just be in the moment, and then you get in your head and you're like, okay, if I say this, is it gonna like mess the mood up? And you start kind of like getting your head in that.
True.
And so having conversations before. And also, like, even having conversations about, so, like, anything, if you think of, like, if this happens, it's going to, like, mess my confidence up. Like, so if rejection's something that you really struggle with, and if your partner says, like, no in a moment, and then you feel, like, start to kind of internalize that, having a conversation of, like, hey, like, if you're not in the mood, like, would you be open to, like, holding your remote control while, like, I'm, like, using a remote control vibrator, or just talking about, like, hey, like, if you're not in the mood, can we at least, like, would you be open to, like, cuddling, and to just having, like, a conversation of, like, what are the options for, like, what's your menu of options in the bedroom, and finding out, like, hey, like, when you do this, I really like this, or I'm not really a fan of this, and, like, have a conversation about it so that it's not so awkward. And then I've even seen too where, like, people will have, like, a like a conversation after where they talk through like the intimacy and like what they liked and didn't like, so then you like can get better for like the next time. And so just communication is the big thing, I have to say, with confidence. And then trying new things out that can actually build confidence for both of you too. Wearing lingerie, that can help boost your confidence. And I always say like lingerie is your partner is going to enjoy you no matter what, or they should. But lingerie is more about like how you feel, and less about like your partner. So like doing things that are going to make you feel good and that you can enjoy together. Like toys, you can have any toy can be a couple's toy. And so those are things that, and trying new things is a great way to build our confidence.
Okay. That I will say, the communication aspect, that is something that does take a lot of courage for people to be able to talk to their partner about, even opening that conversation. I know can be very difficult because I've had difficulty myself doing that. So is there any advice you give to just starting it?
Yeah, so you can look up yes, no, maybe list. You can, and so basically you can do it digitally, or I'm kind of old school. I like to print and write things. So what I would do is I would print a copy for each of your partners, and you have one for yourself, and you fill it out. Basically, it's a list of different types of intimacy, a list of kinks and different sexual activities. And so you go through and you put what's a yes for you, what's a no, and then what's a maybe. And then you have a conversation with your partners on what did you fill out. And so then this helps build confidence in knowing like what the menu of options are. And then you find new things that you might not even have known that your partner was into, or that you both were wanting to explore. And so that's what I would suggest starting, as far as like finding like new things to try. And then that can be a really great place, a great like door opener for other conversations.
I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I think about Esther Perel's list of sexual conversation starters.
Oh yeah.
And so you literally just pick questions from a list. Like sometimes people need that template, kind of like the yes, no, maybe they just need that template. All that stuff really helps, because you should like when you have conversations about sex, especially with like if it feels like in your relationship there's issues with sex, like maybe one of you isn't confident or sex isn't happening very often or whatever, the conversation tends to be like a negative one, like we have a problem to fix. Using like yes, no, maybe list, or like a list of conversation starters, it kind of flips it on its head, where it's like we're not trying to fix anything, we're just trying to learn about each other.
I like that.
Or learn about ourselves. Yes. That ends up being a much more fun conversation too, as opposed to like, we don't do it enough and it's a problem and it's bothering me, and it's like, let's get away from that narrative and let's just learn. Yeah. And then you can kind of like figure out a new way, to do it from there. And that kind of goes to like, I have like a few tips of like how to build confidence, especially when you're talking about like partnered sex.
Okay.
I think cultivating emotional intimacy is also a big way to build confidence. Like emotional intimacy, meaning we're having honest conversation. We're talking about our struggles, but also what we enjoy. Like the safety of that can be very confidence boosting. And it does depend on your partner. Like if you have a partner that isn't safe, is not emotionally safe, that's going to be
makes it
like
harder.
Almost impossible, if you don't have the space to talk about like the real stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, because I always like to take it from the other partner's perspective too. What are ways, if my partner is struggling with being confident sexually, what are things that I can do to help foster a safe space or help them with their journey on gaining sexual confidence? Like, what can I do?
I would ask them what would help. Because I would say it's kind of hard to say like what's going to help, because it really depends on the person. And two, like you mentioned earlier about, a lot of times people come in and they're like, oh, we're not having enough sex, there's a problem. Well, what is enough sex?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So there's no number really of it's really what is enough for you. Like, and then too, if some people will talk about like scheduling intimacy or like scheduling, like, okay, this is our sex night. Wednesday night's our sex night. And that might, like, if you're having someone struggling with like confidence or different things, that might feel like a lot of pressure to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you need to look at, okay, we're not going to say like we have to have sex on this night, but we're going to schedule an intimacy. So it could be like holding hands, going for a walk, doing a like art activity. And that might turn into sex, but it doesn't have to. And like having that pressure removed can like really help.
Yeah.
So, but it ultimately depends on the person and like what they're struggling with that will help them be more comfortable, but ultimately just making sure that there is a safe space for them to be able to communicate their needs.
Yeah, I think you've got to figure out the meaning of all of this for the person. Like even like when you mentioned rejection sensitivity, when someone feels like if someone initiates sex and their partner's answer is no and they feel very rejected, there's a lot of meaning behind that. Like, are you only upset because you're not going to get a physical release? Or did you feel undesired? Do you feel like they never want you? Do you question if they're attracted to you? Are you feeling lonely? And like, there's so many things that could mean for someone. And then same for the partner who maybe is saying no. Maybe to them, it means I'm not rejecting you. I just really am not in the mood, right? Yeah. Like, it's just, there's so much you can tease apart. So I think meeting all of it with curiosity is the best, which I think is what you're speaking to. Yeah. But yeah.
I like it, guys. This is good advice. Yeah, Lyndsey, do you have any other questions at all?
I don't think so. I mean, this has been a really good conversation. I mean, we could go on all day about this topic, right?
No, I mean, when it comes to like, how to build sexual confidence, coming from someone who is just kind of trying to listen and observe, what I've gained as far as my knowledge would be step one is to kind of educate yourself and learn yourself. Right, is to get into
the miseducation that you probably learned in school.
Oh, girl, all day, every day. But yeah, to kind of get in tune with your body, figure out what makes you tick and what you really like. And then the second step after that would be being able to communicate that to your partner, and kind of even opening the door and gathering data together, and figuring out what works for you guys together as a unit. Like, so it's kind of that's a really good little, step one and step two, how to dip your toe in building confidence. I really liked that. That's a good summary. Yeah. Okay, so before we get into like the end of the episode, I'm going to ask you my question I ask everybody, my little spiel. And it's basically that this is very much a sex positive podcast, right? Yeah. And the things that I've learned about sex positivity is, one, that consent is the number one thing that we all need to work towards and at. Consent is key. Two is that the sex positive movement is very inclusive, different body types, lifestyles. And then number three, which I think is the most important, is we preach the need for comprehensive and inclusive sex education, which I think is lacking here in the United States, especially here in Texas. Yeah. So my question to you is, I want to know what your sexual education was. I want to know definitely like what happened at home, like from your guardian or your parents, how you got your sexual education at home. And then I also would like to know your formal education, like what grade were you in, what did they go through, type thing.
Goodness. I guess first kind of learned about, the first memory I have is, I don't even remember what the joke was, but it was in probably like 3rd grade, I think. And there was like a sex joke told among like us kids. And then like I went back home and I was like, repeated it. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I repeated it. And I was like, is that what that is? And they're like, yeah. That was my like sex talk.
Interesting.
Right? Don't even remember it. So it was obviously like stuck out to me, right? And then when I was a little bit older, I was victim of the American Girl. I forget the title of the book, but it's basically like a book. It was mostly about like how to care for your body. Okay. Like how to clean yourself and about like your like menstrual cycle. But I was given that book and told to like read it. So that was my education at home. At school, in PE class, we had a video that we had to watch. It was basically about menstrual cycles, pretty much. And then when I was in 5th grade, some of my friends started like becoming like sexually active. I didn't really know a lot, but I was like, this is really bad. And so like I I turned a note in of that they should, one of my friends was like passing around with these like boys about like talking about like, doing sexual things like on the school bus. I turned it in to the counselor.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I think she still like holds the grudge against me. But, yeah, so that was me. And then when I like actually like first got my menstrual cycle, so this is like the history of like what I knew. When I first got my menstrual cycle, the book that I had and the videos that I watched were not enough because I tried to put a tampon in my clitoris. So did not work.
I would assume not.
Yeah. And so I was very miseducated and was also taught that like, oh, like if you have too many partners, like it's gonna stretch out your vagina, which is not true whatsoever. So yeah, I was taught that like growing up. And so really like my first kind of like dabble like into like having like partners was when I was in probably like a freshman or like sophomore in school. So that was basically my like education was not really much of anything.
Like School of Hard Knocks pretty much.
Yeah. And so I first like kind of really learned about body from like partners that I had. So for as far as my like formal like education, I would say that I was always just like really fascinated with like sex, and I think maybe I had fascination because like I didn't really learn much about it. So like I watched documentaries.
Yeah, when it's a mystery, you're like, I want to know about that. Yeah,
right. So I like watched documentaries. I had lots of sex with different people. I think because I was like trying to figure these things out. I then went on and I worked with the nonprofit, and so I didn't really have like a course or anything that I took with that, but we would always like have education on like HIV and knowing about like the different medications, and so learned a lot about that. And also we would have education on the typical symptoms of different like STIs. And then I took an online like sexual health course, and I actually learned a lot. There was a lot of things I kind of already knew, but like even knowing that like there's a high percentage of like cis men that have like foot fetishes and just like kind of like random things like that. It was interesting. So that I would say that would be more of like formal education. And recently I read the book, well, I'm still kind of reading it, but it's called Feel It All by Casey Tanner, and highly recommend it. They're a queer sex therapist, and the book is just like phenomenal. It's like totally like turning the head on basically like sexual like confidence and like what that actually means and like exploring your body. And I think that's really great. So yeah, a lot of it's been like kind of like informal education.
Typical, very common. Yeah. So as someone who is a sexual educator, how would you like, what do you wish they taught you in school?
So many things. I think one is that I think it should be taught that there's different types of orgasms. And I think it should be taught that like take a mirror and like explore yourself at home and like private, and like this is like things that we should be doing, and it shouldn't be like, oh, your body's some like big scary thing. No, it's a part of you, and you get to know all the good parts of yourself. So I think that would be one thing I would definitely change. I think that it should be more about, instead of being like super specific to like your genitals, I think we should be educated on bodies that are different than ours, and not being so like centered around like reproductive systems, but knowing like different genders and like learning about different sexualities. And yeah, I think there should really be like an actual class that for I don't know how long, but at least for like, instead of just like one video, but like we're gonna, at this age they're gonna have 1 year or at least a semester of this particular class. It's gonna be sexual health,
actual education. Yes. Yeah. I agree
too.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all I have.
I'll give you a moment to promote yourself to our listeners. And for anyone who is listening, we will have Cheyenne's website and socials and like where to find her, but we'll give you a moment to just promote yourself if you would like to.
My website is lovecheyrob.com. That's LOVECHEYROB.com. You can get all of my product recommendations for your bedroom. You can also get, I have a free guide for starting to build your confidence, and one that's a sexy building your confidence, the one that's just for getting confidence for everyday life, depending on where you're at. You can get that for free on my website, and you can join my free Facebook group, which is where I post all my best stuff. So I'd love to see you all there, and you can always DM me too if you have questions that are private and you want to ask.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for coming on. We really enjoyed having you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we, in addition to including where to find her, we'll also include links to like the books that we mentioned, like any resources we might have mentioned. We'll let you all know how and where to find those. So we are also open for listener support. And so for our people who do tune in and want to keep hearing content from us and seeing content from us, you can support us as little as $1 a month. And that just helps us, that helps us continue to promote and produce the content that you all deserve. And let us know what you think about this episode. So what you learned, what you might want us to expand upon, or even if you have episode topic suggestions, let us know in the comments. And we do take listener suggestions. We love those. So anything you might want to hear, we're happy to expand upon. So again, thanks for tuning in. We are Sex Positivity Unfiltered. And remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.